Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Deep Dive. We're going to be taking a deeper look at Luke chapter 7 and Jesus at Simon's house. And we got a question this week that was, the question itself is simple, and it's a great question. I'm super excited, but the answer is going to be a little long-winded, so bear with me. I'm really excited about it, but you may be here a minute. So the question was, how in the world did this sinful woman get into Simon's house? How does she just stroll in there? And something to keep in mind is quite often we read the Bible through our 21st century lens. We look at it and we think, man, I get home, walk through the door, turn around, lock it. You know, it's a weird thing. Somebody breaks into our house. That's not normally a welcome thing. We might even have a stronger reaction than what Simon has in this passage. So it's important to look at that and say, man, that's how our homes are today, but what about their homes? And that's a great question. So what kind of house did Simon have? Well, there's two answers to this. If Simon was wealthy, he had this largely rectangle home. And the first part of the rectangle would have on either side a place to work, the first half of the rectangle, that would have a place to work and keep some animals and things like that. And on the other side, it would have maybe a guest room, some kind of accommodations where the servants lived, something like that. A small little house kind of built into it. But in between those would be this open courtyard. And the purpose of this courtyard was to extend the living area of the house. And quite often between the two buildings on the opening, they would stretch out this awning. And so that way you weren't sitting out in the sun when you were sitting outside. And it was this great living and entertaining space. And we know through history that Jewish synagogues quite often would meet in people's homes. And it's in this kind of area that they would meet in this courtyard because it was open. And if you packed it full of people, it didn't get unbearably hot and stinky. So it was this great place for people to come together and meet. We also know that Simon was a Pharisee and that he was a teacher. So pretty good chance that Simon had a synagogue meet in his home. You know, it's all speculation, but again, pretty good chance. In the back of the house, as you got further in, you would get into where their kitchen was and where Simon's family would live, and maybe their more private dining room or a place for more private conversations. That's as you get further back into what is going on. If Simon was not wealthy, his house would have been much more of a square. And instead of having this big gate like the wealthy house would have had, this gate that could open so people could bring their animals in and things like that to store where the animals stayed, instead of having this large gate to enter through, you would typically have homes on either side of this square home. It was common for them to be two-story, but it didn't have to be two-story. And you would have a normal doorway as you walked in. So on the front of this house, you've got a window or two and a doorway. And when you got in, you were in one of two rooms, likely on the main floor, maybe three if they had a larger house. So the first room you walked into was their family room, their living room, their everything room. They did everything throughout the day, typically in this room. Quite often you'd have like a little place to cook meals in the corner. Now, they could have in this back room a place to prep meals, or they could have a little side room to prep meals, but quite often all that was done in the same room. And then they would have this other room, which was either the place they slept or the place where it was a lower room where animals stayed, or maybe they were just wealthy enough to have a guest room or a place for people to stay as they visited, because Jewish people, especially in the first century and in the Old Testament, were very hospitable people. So we've got these rooms, and it's important. Oh, and then they would likely have a loft for their bedrooms. So the very first room you entered into, if Simon was not an incredibly wealthy guy or he was more on the poor side, this first room you walked into would be where Jesus and all of the other guests were eating. So why is this important? Why does this matter? You know, so we've got this woman is coming to see Jesus. Now, news has traveled fast, and Simon probably helped that because we talked about on Sunday, this was a big thing for his ego and his standing. So Simon has spread the word, I'm sure, that Jesus was going to be eating at his house. People are talking about this. This woman wants to come see Jesus. Well, if Simon is wealthy, this gate at Simon's house, this gate into his courtyard, would most likely have been wide open. not as an open invite, but so that as people walked by, they're looking in and they're seeing Jesus sitting with Simon, and they're thinking, man, this Simon guy must be pretty important for this traveling rabbi to come and stay and sit with him and eat at his house. We talked again, this was all about Simon's ego. So he wanted people to see. He wasn't closing the doors. He was bragging to everyone around. So if Simon was wealthy, then his gate would have been open and she would have had easy access to walk straight in, to look in, see Jesus in this courtyard, and walk straight to him. Now, if Simon was not wealthy, then his windows would have been open and his front door, of course, would have been open. He would have been showing off to anyone he could that Jesus has come to his humble home. So as this woman comes by, she would have known where Jesus was, but she would face a few more barriers, right? Because as she comes in, she would have to walk in out of the bright sun into this dingy room because they didn't have lights like we have today. Even if they had candles lit, which they likely wouldn't in the middle of the day, she would have to walk in, let her eyes adjust, see Jesus, travel this cramped space, because it's not just Jesus and Simon. It's not just Jesus and Simon's family. It is Jesus, Simon, likely some members of his family, and these other guests. We see in verse 49 that there are other people there that Jesus addresses. So this small room would have likely been packed if Simon was not a wealthy person. So she would have had to make her way, after letting her eyes just make her way to find Jesus in this cramped place, which would have made it much more apparent that someone had entered and made it much more awkward for her to get to him. Now, again, why does any of this matter? Why does any of this matter at all? Because it shows us how desperate this woman was to get to Jesus. She heard he was there. Wealthy or not, she made her way to Simon's house. She didn't say, I'll wait till Jesus finds me, because if he really cares about me, he'll find me. No, she goes and finds Jesus. She gets there, wealthy house. She has to make her way into this courtyard. She has to take that step through into a place she knows she's not wanted. Same thing, unwealthy house. She has to make her way into this home where she knows she's not wanted, because she saw Jesus and she knew about Jesus, and she said, this man is worth my being ridiculed. She was a sinful woman walking into a Pharisee's home. She knew she was going to be ridiculed. She also knew that Jesus was worth giving up what little honor she had left. She walks in and she uses her hair to wash Jesus' feet. And she also knew that Jesus was even worth giving up her life, because this was not a good thing. This was not a common thing. Depending on the sin that was in her life, she could have been unclean, ceremonially unclean, walking into Simon's house, which would make Simon's house unclean, would make Simon and his whole family and all of his guests unclean. This was a big deal that she walked in, and could have even cost her her life. She knew Jesus was worth it. So as we look at this, let's try to study Scripture. Let's try to look at Scripture through a first century lens. None of us are perfect students of history, and there's some gaps there we do our best to try to figure out. But let's do our best to look back and look at it as things would have been then. Things would have been for Jesus and those around him in first century Palestine. I know this went a little long this week, but I hope it gives you a little bit of a better understanding of how she would have made it in there. She wasn't welcome. She made a way. She found Jesus and she made a way to him. I hope that helps. I'll catch you guys again on Sunday. We're going to take a few minutes today and we're going to dive into that question. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Deep Dive. We're going to be taking a deeper look. So, I don't need all that in there.